Howdy, 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 guys. We are live. Hey, this is a special show. Usually I do, Aaron live and I'm doing sketching and all that kind of stuff. But I've got together with some other creators, Graham, Nolan, Andy Smith, Art Thibert, occasionally Billy Tucci, Dan Fraga occasionally. And we've decided to do this sort of roundtable discussion once a week on Thursday evenings at 5, where we just pick different topics each week and then discuss those things. We haven't got an official name for the show yet, but we're working on it. And what we do is we sort of rotate hosts every week. So Graham hosted last week. I'm hosting this week. I'm not sure who gets it next week, but so mark this on your calendars. This is a regular event. We'll be talking about a bunch of different things related to comics, sci-fi, maybe movies, who knows? The topic is always going to change. But we are live. We are here, and I've got guests waiting to come in, so let me introduce them one at a time. I've got, first up, we've got Andy Smith will be coming in. Now, Andy has his First Man Indiegogo campaign, which is funding right now, and I think it ends tomorrow, so you want to give that a look. And let me bring in Andy to say hello. There he is. Andy Smith.
Well, hello.
All right.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Well, I'm excited to have you. And
I have a great book for show and tell too with this subject matter. So
well, I'm excited. Okay, now the show wouldn't be at least partially complete unless I could add a third bald guy with facial hair. And that's where we're going to bring in the great, the legendary, the man who needs no introduction, Graham Nolan, of course, known best probably for co-creating Bane, but working on Batman and a multitude of other characters and books over the years. And right now he's funding a book called Alien Alamo on Indiegogo that's live right now that you should also check out. So let's have a big warm welcome for my next guest, Graham Nolan.
Well, you saved the handsomest bald man for last. Let's face it.
That's right.
How is it you look like you have a tan? You live in upstate New York, for God's sake.
It must be the lighting.
It's got to be, because
I'm Irish, so I'm like right now in the winter I am white.
I got pasty white lighting, no matter what time of year.
Yeah,
I don't know what
that's what I've got.
Yeah. See, I usually look like this in the summer with my fishing and everything, but I don't know. It must be the lighting in here.
Oh, well.
You got those yellow lights.
You always have like fancy backdrops behind you, so you must have a nice green screen sitting back there, right?
I do. Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna have to get one. I'm gonna have to step up my game a little bit so I can do some of this. So I'll probably be in touch with you later to find out where you got yours and how it works and all that stuff.
It's simple. It's easy. It's great.
It's pretty much just pops up like a banner, right? Or
yeah, it's like I got a large oval and it goes horizontally oval like that. And then it comes with almost like a photography stand. And then it clips onto that and it hangs back there. Cool. So it's pretty big.
Well,
I might have to get one of those.
We got 19 people watching right now. It looks like we've got a bunch of comments in the comments section. So bald is beautiful. Let's look at, there you go. Humphrey Bear says bald is beautiful. So you got it.
That's right. Because we own it.
All right. So here's tonight's topic. Marvel, the Silver Age. Now, I've been reading that book by Sean Howe, the Untold History. What's it called? Marvel Comics, The Untold Story. That's what it is, by Sean Howe. And I found a lot of stuff in there that I actually knew. But now I'm reading some stuff that I didn't know that I think is kind of cool. And it made me think, you know what? Let's go back and talk about the beginnings of Marvel Comics. Art Thibert just stepped in, so I'm going to let him in. Let me give you a little short introduction. Art Thibert is one of the great all-time inkers in comics. He's been doing it longer than anybody on screen right now, so he is the oldest dude on this live cast. So I just want to make sure that that's known. But anyway, let's I think
I'm the youngest.
He's funding something on Indiegogo too called Chronomechanics. So everybody's got a book except me right now. So let's bring in Art. There he is. Art Thibert live.
Let it be known. Let it be known. Hey, gentlemen, how are you?
The guy with hair. The one guy with hair kind of ruined the balance. Now look at him. He's just
showing off.
Yep. He's ruining the whole balance of things.
All right. That's what I do. That's what I'm known for. Yeah, and thanks for the Chrono Mechanics plug. Yeah, it's in demand right now. So, but these two guys over here, they have live campaigns. I think Andy's closing. Is it tomorrow? Is that?
Yeah, it's tomorrow. So I'll be on late tomorrow night.
First man.
That's right. Okay, dudes, here's what I want to do. I want to go, we'll start with Andy, and we'll just kind of go, would that be clockwise? Everything's backwards when I'm doing this. On my screen, it's clockwise. So I'm going to go Andy, Graham, and then Art. So if there was one book from the Silver Age, okay, that you don't have, or maybe you do have, but is a prized possession that you'd want to have, if you could say one book out of the Marvel Silver Age, not necessarily because it's worth the most, but just one that really means something to you or would mean something to you if you had it. Andy, what would it be?
Silver Surfer #1. And I actually do. I have a coverless version of it. And it's funny. I have it on my spin rack. Well, I had it on my spin rack. I was at a convention, just a small little, one I went to just as a fan. This was back in the fall last year. And I saw a dude had it on his back wall, a coverless Surfer #1. And I'm like, I asked him, I just got to ask, what are you selling that for? Because I go, I'm not interested. I have one, but literally it's coverless. It's flat,
Mm-hmm.
but I never would think to see that on a back wall. And the guy's like, oh, it's $100. And I was like, what? So I came home and took it off my spin rack and bagged and boarded it and put it away. I was like, that needs to come off the spin rack. That's $100. And then my second one, I will say, was Submariner #1.
Hang on a second. Is that because of Buscema's artwork? Why Silver Surfer #1?
Well, I love Silver Surfer for just as a character and the aesthetic of him. And then, Buscema's artwork.
Okay.
His artwork.
You had a second?
Second, Submariner one. Once again, I love the character, but Buscema's artwork. And I actually just picked up a copy of that. It's only like a 4.5 condition, so it's not great, but it's complete and it's a #1. So
cool. All right, Graham.
Well, I have a lot of those already. Yeah. I have Tales of Suspense 39, Journey to Mystery 83, Hulk 1 through 6.
Wow. You have Hulk 1 through 6?
Yeah, I've got Fantastic Four 1. The one I'm missing, the one I'm missing, and the one I want, and I'll never have, because I missed the boat, is Amazing Fantasy 15. Now, there was years where you would go to conventions and that damn book every dealer had one, at least one. Mm-hmm. And they all had them for between $1,500 and $2,500 in various conditions, but you never saw it much over $2,500. And I said, I'll just pass because, the kids are young, got a lot of bills and everything like that. And I'll get it later on. Well, forget it. I couldn't get a coverless version for under 20 now. Yeah. So I think that ship has sailed, unless I want to sell off a bunch of those other ones that I do have to get that. But I don't want to do that. I've got all those ones that I really, really love. Particularly, I'm trying to get FF1 through 102. And the only key FF book I'm missing many, but the only key one I'm missing is 5.
Really?
First Dr. Doom.
Yeah, that's key. Art, give me a book.
Well, for me, it's Avengers #4, the first appearance of Cap into the Marvel Universe. And I actually own that book. It is in complete and utter disarray. I went, before we moved, I went through my old collection and I was like, I gotta put these things in bags. I gotta finally try to take care of them, right? So I hadn't opened this box for like 20, 30 years. And I opened it, I touched the cover, and it literally crumbled. I'm not kidding. The cover stock just turned to ash. The interior pages held up better, but the cover stock actually just disintegrated. So I still was like, I got to put this in a bag because I'm never going to be able to touch this thing again. Like, this is it. I couldn't even open it and try to enjoy it one last time because I would have just devastated it. So I just kind of slid it in the bag and I have it. So at least I can say I own it and I do enjoy the hell out of that story. But Avengers #4 was probably like, that was it for me,
Wow.
Yeah. All right. Well, for me, I was a big Spider-Man collector, and at one time I had Spider-Man 2 and up. I had every issue, but Spider-Man #1 is it for me. Even when I was a little kid, I wanted that more than Amazing 15. I just thought the cover was cool, the FF guest starred in it, and that was a book that I really, really wanted, and I never got. And out of frustration, because I knew I'd never get it, it's way too expensive now, I sold my entire Spider-Man collection. I said, screw this. I'm 2 and up, and I can't finish it, so I sold it all and paid off my truck, which is probably a good sound investment. But
Yeah.
so that was it for me, was Spider-Man #1. Okay, so I got another question I want to go around with here now.
Can I make a comment about Spider-Man?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like early Spider-Man when I was a kid, I didn't like him. I liked Spider-Man. Let me clarify. I liked Spider-Man, but I didn't like Peter Parker. I thought Peter Parker was a loser. I couldn't relate to him at all. And then for me, when they did Marvel Team Up and like Spider-Man solo stuff that didn't have Aunt May and some of this other stuff in it, I was like, oh my gosh, Spider-Man is really cool. Because I think Spider-Man, Peter Parker always just kind of Peter, you're just kind of a loser. How could you be?
That's the whole point of the strip.
I know.
Look, you have this functional guy as Spider-Man, right? It's the same guy. It's Peter Parker. It's not like a dual identity thing like Clark Kent and Superman, right?
Yeah.
It's he's completely functional as Spider-Man, but his social life and as a human being, he's completely out of his league. You know what I mean? He can't make anything happen or anything work. So I always was like, wow, man, you could do anything as Spider-Man, but as a human being, you fail. Even as a little kid, I was like, I can't relate to this, man.
Yeah, he had no room for
with Tobey Maguire, and I was like, oh, there you go. I can't get into this either.
No room for
stand losers.
Art's like, I'm in high school getting laid. I can't relate to this kid.
Yeah. Mary Jane, how do you not step it up for Mary Jane? Come on, man.
All right. Okay, so here's the second one in this. Okay, so that's the book. But now, do you have a favorite Silver Age series? One that really identifies with the Silver Age that maybe, may not be the most visible one, but something that you always liked, and even maybe as a collector or as a reader, liked the concept of. Give me a series, Andy.
Oh, that's easy. Because I'm actually collecting the whole series, and when I say what it is, you'll realize it's not hard to get because it only ran for 62 issues. Is Captain Marvel. I only need 3. I need 5, 11, and 24. And the funny thing is, because I always, when I was growing up as a kid, I bought Captain Marvel Spotty, his back issues. And some of those are ones I still have to this day. And then last year, I was organizing my stuff and I realized, holy crap, I almost have the whole run. And I was 25 issues short, but still, that's not a lot when it's only 62. So as I go to conventions, I look for them. And now there's a guy in town, the guy, Shelton Drum, that does Heroes Con. He has a huge warehouse. And I could easily email him and be like, hey, I need these 3 issues. He'd have them there in a couple of days. And a friend of mine was like, why don't you do that? I'm like, because that's not how I want to find them. I want to find them. I don't want, because literally Shelton has everything. If you want Amazing Fantasy 15, he's got a few of them, So
FF5, let him know.
I guarantee he has it. And it's just, I want to find them. So there was a small show in South Carolina. I'm real close to the border. Just a little hotel show this past Saturday I went to. Had 12 dealers, just in a small ballroom, all comics. And I was able to pick up 2 more. And now I'm down to the 3 that I need left. But I always like the costume. I like the green and white costume. I like the red and blue, obviously the best. I love the Jim Starlin stuff. It's where I discovered Pat Broderick's work when I was a kid. The issue where he fights Submariner is really cool by Gene Colan. Mm-hmm. So I'll just have to go with that top of mind because I'm almost done with the series.
All right. Graham, how about you?
So the question is, what series best represents the Silver Age?
No, which series from that best represents the Silver Age do you like? Saying you could say the FF, but the FF sort of spans so many decades. Unless the Silver Age FF run is your favorite run, then you can go ahead and pick that. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm looking for something that occurred between 1961 and 1969 that's your favorite run from a series of Marvel.
Well, that would be the Fantastic Four. For me, the Fantastic Four ended with 102. I mean, I'll give the Romita ones in there too, because and really I continued to, as long as Stan was writing it. It still had that creator in there, but really the heart of the FF ended at 102. Just like Star Trek ended after the animated series.
Well, the great thing about FF was it had so many great first appearances, especially in the Silver Age. You know, everything from, you know, of course, not just the villains, but Black Panther, the Inhumans,
right,
Warlock. You know, you just go on and on. Silver Surfer, Galactus. I mean, it was just a great book that at the time.
Yeah. There's so many great stories, you know, arcs that were within that. You know, you could almost segment that first 102. You know, you had the like 1 through say around 40. You know, the FF had a certain feel to it, and number 40 kind of changed that. That's where Ben Grimm finally gets to Doctor Doom and just F's him up, you know. And then Joe Sinnott came on and changed the look of the book a couple issues later, and then you had that incredible run, you know, from that point on through, you know, you had the Inhumans, you had the Silver Surfer, you had this Man, This Monster, you had Annihilus, you had, it just goes on, you know, and just the artwork, it's always Kirby, there's no fill-ins. So yeah, definitely the FF for me.
Yep. Art?
Yep. Now wait, before you go to art, you said Silver Age up to 69. The Silver Age goes into the 70s, doesn't it?
Technically, it ends with Conan #1, which is 1970, isn't it? Someone correct me if I'm wrong.
I mean, if that's the case, then I mean, the Captain Marvel thing I said kind of counts because it started in the 60s, but it definitely
It started in 68, so that counts. It counts.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're good, Andy. You're good.
Just want to be accurate. That's all.
Yeah.
Art, go ahead.
I wanted to say Fantastic Four, but I cannot top Graham's just rundown of those stories, because I mean, think about, I mean, other than Spider-Man, which is the Rogues Gallery early on, like Fantastic Four is right up there, man. I mean, as far as creativity and being prolific, it's just amazing. And world building, it's hands down is probably the best run ever in comics. I hope that Marvel, you know, Cinematic Universe does its justice. It doesn't seem like they will, but hopefully they will. I don't know why film can't get it. It's a pretty simple, straightforward concept. But for me, if it isn't Fantastic Four, it's Daredevil. And I think when I was really young, I like street level characters like Batman, things like that. And I grew up in the 66 Adam West, time. So when Daredevil came out, and it was a Marvel book, it was the closest thing to Batman that they had. Mm-hmm. So I latched onto that, Wally Wood early on. Even that early costume that was kind of strange by today's standards.
The yellow one.
Yeah. I was hooked. And then when the new costume,
the guy was blind. Let's face it.
Right.
What do you expect?
What does his costume look like?
I'm going to
about this costume. Who designed like the straight red costume after that?
That was Wally Wood.
Wally Wood.
Wally as well.
Yeah.
That thing holds up, man. That is a very contemporary costume design. That is just crazy. It's kind of like Black Panther, where it's deceivingly like really simple, straightforward, but it's badass. You know what I mean? Yeah. And there's so much you could do with like with the Black Panther and Daredevil's costume, like the silhouettes of it with the horns and it turns like the profile and then the shadows on the wall and stuff like that. Just fantastic. And I think when I was younger, I liked street level, just brawlers, that just bare knuckled it and beat the heck out of, criminals. So, and then when I was in school, one of my teachers gave me Daredevil #2. She just gave it to me. and she's like, I think you would like this. And I still have it to this day. And so then I just went like kind of like you guys over the years, just kind of bought things. And so I think I have the first 50 books
that's cool.
in order of the Daredevil run, and you just enjoy the hell out of it. So yeah, for me,
who designed the yellow and red? Was that Kirby?
No, it was Bill Everett.
Yeah,
Bill Everett. That's right, Bill Everett.
You know what? It looks like a Bill Everett design.
Yeah.
Okay, you know that book is so behind to launch. You know who inked the backgrounds on that?
No.
Steve Ditco.
Really?
Oh, really?
Yeah, take a look next time at the backgrounds, and you'll say, "Holy shit, that is Steve Ditko."
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
All right. So for me, I mean, I've always been a huge Spider-Man fan.
I was going to say, yeah.
Too easy of an answer. Really, the book I really dig is Tales of Suspense, when Cap and Iron Man were both in it.
Yeah.
And I'm collecting those now, and I just thought that getting that, they switch the cover every month, so one month it's Iron Man, the next month it's Cap.
Mm-hmm.
You always had those two stories in there, so you're getting like these 10-page cliffhangers every issue. I just really love that format, and unfortunately I don't think that format works in today's market, but I would love, wouldn't it be great to go back and do a Tales of Suspense kind of thing where you had both, two main characters in there, so you're getting 2 for 1 every issue. I don't know. For some reason, I think those are cool, and those are the things I'm searching out at cons and stuff. Mm-hmm. Starting with 58, which is where Cap first crossed over, and then I have 59, but I don't have 58 yet, which is an expensive book, but I'm going to get it. I am going to get it.
Well, it didn't last very long, did it? The Cap Iron Man, that didn't
up to 100, and then it split off to Cap 100, and then Iron Man number 1. Same with Tales to Astonish. They, went to Hulk and Submariner. That split too in 1968, which we'll get to 1968 in a minute. But Scott Dunbier is in here, and he had a question I thought was kind of interesting. And I know Graham's going to have an opinion on this, but look at that. Who was the worst inker on the FF?
Ooh,
George Bell.
Idea. Who?
George Bell.
Oh, I thought you said George Bailey, and I was thinking of
I was okay. So the first one that came to mind, I forgot about George Bell because I associate him with inking Buscema on the early Avengers, but the first one that came to mind was Chick Stone. I didn't like Chick Stone.
I like Chick Stone.
Did you really?
Like his heavy outline stuff, but George Bell and Paul Reinman just butchered Kirby.
Paul Reinman. Yeah.
Was did Colette ever ink any FFs?
Yeah.
Did he?
Yeah. In the late 30s into early 40s, I think he inked.
And I know Vinny would, if he was still alive, he'd have me rubbed out for saying this, but man, I'm telling you that guy was horrible. And although I tolerated him on Kirby's Thor, for some reason,
I was going to say I
loved him on Thor.
I loved him on Thor. And I don't think Vinny, like later Vinny, 80s Vinny, he was just collecting a check. And even in the 70s. But, man, you look at some of the romance stuff that he did, and I thought the inking on that stuff was just great. Some Charlton romance stuff. and like the Thor stuff. Because he had that nice, he had that more illustrative look with the fine pen lines and then a thicker
he wasn't a stylized guy. Like Kirby's very stylized, especially later on in his career. So he was more like a traditional like illustrative approach with the things like that. So if anybody was a little stylized like Kirby, it didn't really lend itself to the style of what
I thought with Thor though that what Vinny brought to the table was texture. He texturized everything, when there was guys with fur, the Asgardians wearing and Odin wearing the fur, he really did great texture stuff. The wood, the ground, all that stuff. When he got to the city stuff, it wasn't, as good, but and he prettied up the girls too. Cause
that's what I meant.
Some homely chicks,
That's the romance part.
Yeah. He'd do these luscious eyelashes, like the eyes he did on women.
Yeah,
with the eyelashes
and the hair.
stuff.
Yeah, look at his hair.
And the hair, yeah.
Yeah, he does beautiful. He does beautiful hairlines.
Well, wasn't he one of those guys that was getting everybody, like he was kind of a ladies' man and got Marvel guys got some action, brought some action their way? I'm trying to be
sorry.
Well, now, hang on a second. According to this book, the Sean Howe's book, Vinny would drive up in like a limo or a car with some hot chicks in the back seat and pick up his pages and drive off and come. So they were saying in this book that he always had a few women on his arm, a la Steranko or something. I guess I don't know, but
so he knew the women.
What's that?
I was saying he knew the ladies, so he knew how to ink them because he.
Do you ever see a picture of his house and stuff?
No.
There's a book that Tomorrow's put out probably a decade ago. I think it's called Thin Black Line. And it's all about Vinny. And there's a picture of his house, this estate with this nice big pool, and you're just like, what the?
Well, weren't they saying like he was kind of a pimp? Like I wanted to be nice, but wasn't he like kind of moonlighting as a pimp? Like because he always seemed to have
I don't know.
And stuff. Yeah.
There's a great picture of Stan and him together in Vinny's living room. Vinny was a good-looking guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
He had that Italian blood, but he kept his hair apparently. And my Italian blood did not keep my hair. It's worked on me the other direction. Okay, let me throw this out here. Let's get into the real meat and potatoes of the Silver Age, behind the scenes a little bit here. Where do you guys come in on this, on Stan Lee's part versus Kirby's part in the creation of a lot of these characters? Because it's interesting. I'll reference the book I was reading again, in that at first it seemed like there was quite a bit of give and take, but then later when they got pissed at each other, Kirby was taking credit for everything, and then Stan was saying, oh, he's out of his mind, he didn't contribute anything. And then Kirby, of course, later was taking credit for, which I wasn't aware of, but according to this book again, was taking credit for the creation of Spider-Man, which I don't know that how involved he was in that. It seems to me that was more Ditco, but which we'll get to in a minute after we talk about Kirby, because the Ditco had some interesting things too I wanted to bring up. But anyway, so where do you guys stand on that? Andy, go ahead and jump in first.
Just from the stories I've read about how about how Stan would do the writing, and I use quotes for that, where basically he would call the guys in like a Kirby or a Colin and just chat for like an hour or so, and then it's up to you to go, take notes and go home and draw the thing. That doesn't really seem that 50-50 to me. That definitely seems a little more in the artist there. If I'm just talking to you and you're just blathering on about this is a story. I mean, I guess he's laying out an overall story, but still, if I've got like a notepad and I'm just writing down notes that I'm going to go draw from, I don't know. I think the bare bones of Fantastic Four in the beginning, and Graham would know more, would be Stan. But then as it moved on, I think it went more Kirby. Like it started off Stan, but then as the book went on, I think Kirby had more of an input into it, even with dialogue stuff in the panel borders.
Graham?
Well,
it's
sort of a contentious topic anymore because none of us were there.
Right.
But from everything I've read and from people that I know who have known these people personally, what I come out of it is that it in essence, it was a 50-50 in that, okay, maybe Stan didn't write a full script and give it to Kirby. Like the story about the Galactus Trilogy was that, Stan was in a rush and he said, let's have the Fantastic Four meet God. Okay. So with that, Kirby went and plotted out the Fantastic Four trilogy. And Stan wrote all the dialogue. Now Kirby wrote stuff in the gutters, but Stan rarely used it. A lot of time he was just the dialogue did nothing more than describe what was happening in the picture in the first place. So Stan would lift that dialogue up and bring it forward and add character and nuance to these characters. Whereas Kirby was a blunt instrument, and which is evident when you read his stuff, his New God stuff, that it's very heavy handed. And he was a big idea guy, but he didn't really capture a lot of the nuance and humanization of the characters the way that Stan could. So, I think it's not fair to run Stan down now because he had such a personality, and people think that, that he, was like a Svengali and, he conned everybody. But I don't think that was the case. I don't think we'd be talking about Marvel Comics if there wasn't Stan Lee.
Right.
He was the face of Marvel Comics. He pushed all that stuff, and he was always giving credit to the artists and stuff. Yes, he maybe took too much credit too for things that he didn't do, and neither of them had good memories, and they were constantly misremembering things about who did what. Right. I mean, there's only two things that you can say. One, that Stan Lee did not create Doctor Strange, and two, he did not create the Silver Surfer. I mean, those are unarguable truths. Well, everything else you can say. They both added to the tapestry of those characters.
Art?
I think it's like the Lennon-McCartney thing where it's interesting and fun to talk about and to kind of like listen to the music and go, well, I think this is where, Paul did something and John did it here and whatever, and to try to tear apart like the structure of the creative music or the comic or whatever. And I think it's always interesting, but collaborative. Like 1 month, like to Andy's thing, like 1 month it could have been like where Jack did more than Stan, but then the following month it could have been the opposite, and so on and so forth. And so like I did a lot of jobs that I didn't get credit for because things just need to get done. You know what I mean? So there's also all of those things that just kind of happen. Like what people don't know, like monthly schedules are pretty insane. And when you're in the middle of a run on a book, you just do what has to be done. You're not even thinking about, am I going to get credit? Who's going to get credit? Whatever. You're just doing whatever has to get done to get the book out. So I think there's a lot of that in collaborative, back and forth. And so to say like I did this and he did that, I think it gets really hard to separate, but it's fun. It's a fun debate to have. But for me, the Stan and Jack thing was when it was the original artwork, when Jack wanted his original artwork back, and then find out that some of it had been sold, and there's a big drama there. And I think I always wanted Stan to stand up for Jack, and I always wanted Stan just to say, whatever you need, brother, I'll make it happen. Because none of this would exist without your contribution. And that's the part of this whole story, the Stan and Jack story, that I don't like, is just kind of the way it ended. Because I always thought like Jack kind of deserved better in the big scheme of things. And I know like, Stan got to write the history. Jack was never that interested in. He went over to DC. He just wanted to create. But Stan got to write the history. So then, Jack, I think, kind of got pushed a little bit into the back. And then, when the original artwork and, there was nobody over at Marvel that really stood up for Jack and to get the original artwork back and all that. That's the only problem I ever had with the Stan Jack thing and their relationship. Other than that, I think that tension in a relationship, and I think those things can be good as long as there's still mutual respect. Because difference of opinion is fine, and sometimes the best ideas can come out of that tension. And so if there was tension between those guys, and they maintained it for quite a while, you know what I mean? And we got great product out of it, just like the John Lennon, Paul McCartney stuff. You don't think those guys fought? Oh, they fought to get their ideas out there. But in the end, the best ideas rise to the top. So that's kind of how I feel about, Stan and Jack.
Well, I'm one of those guys who kind of went back and forth on the whole thing. You'd read something and go, oh, Stan's a shyster, he didn't do anything. And then you think, oh, Jack's exaggerating or whatever. But it's like, after, of course, reading this book and then reading countless other things that we've all read and been exposed to, I've sort of kind of gotten a new respect for Stan, because it was a period of time where I just thought, this guy's a shyster. This is a bunch of BS. He didn't do anything. And I don't think that's true. I think he added a lot to it. I mean, a lot of was put on the plate of the artists in terms of, like you said, they discuss a plot in a car ride, and then Kirby or Ditko or whoever would go home and draw the whole thing out, and then Jack would come in, Stan would come in over the top and dialogue it. I mean, that was clearly what was going on, and Stan added a lot to what was going on. So as much as being an artist, and I want to stick up for the artists, and I think they did contribute a ton, you can't sit there and say that Stan didn't either. So I think Graham, I think you're right, and Art as well, in your assessment that these guys both contributed in their own way, and it would be criminal to kind of like try and weight it one way or the other. Because I think
it's like a Reese's cup. How do you diminish the chocolate over the peanut butter? Like how do you
exactly
separate the two? Like they both complement and they both are great. So it's just one of those things. And the thing that I think is amazing is that it even existed, that there was that kind of collaboration in comics. Like if you think about the sheer amount of work that those two guys put out, just
So the freedom, though, that it allowed them, because on the other hand, over at DC, you had Mort Weisinger running things, who freaking hated comics, and he hated himself for having to be in comics.
Right.
And he couldn't stand working in it. And he was degrading to writers and all this kind of stuff because he thought he was so much better than that. And here's Stan, who for whatever reason maybe is stuck in comics. He wanted to write the great American novel and never got a chance, but he had a passion for the writing and for comics, and he let the freedom of the artist go and be creative. So if you were an artist and you had the choice of working for Mort Weisinger or working for Stan Lee, there's no comparison.
That's right. Okay, so next, let's take the next step here and go to Ditko, because I found this very interesting. Again, in reading the book, that there was a long period of time, maybe the last 2 years or so, that Ditko was on Spider-Man, and he wasn't even talking to Stan. I mean, they did not get along at all. So basically, my understanding was that Ditko, he would do the story and then just turn it in, and Stan didn't even necessarily know what he was getting, and he would go in and dialogue the thing. And I found that very interesting, dynamic, that they were still able to work together despite the fact that and I don't think it didn't seem like Stan had any animosity towards Ditko. It seemed like Ditko had a lot of animosity towards Stan. Mm-hmm. And it was in this book, they described Ditko as a proponent, an Ayn Rand sort of,
objectivist.
Ayn Rand philosophy, and was very, they conflated that with conservatism, which I'm not really sure that's exactly the correct way to put those two together. But I just thought it was really interesting that you had somebody like Ditko really in an industry that was full of liberal thinking people, creative people, which is generally how that goes, to have someone that would be like, an Ayn Rand philosopher in there, amongst that group of guys creating this Spider-Man stuff. And so I think that was a really, really interesting dynamic. And I don't know that I ever quite got a handle on Ditko's anger and angst. It seemed like he was a pissed off guy. And even after he retired from comics, didn't want anything to do with the artwork, didn't want to do anything to do with fans. I just thought it was very interesting character study. And I don't think I got the whole picture from this book either. Andy, what do you think?
I mean, I'll be honest, this is one area I don't know a lot about, because I don't know, just like you in a way, I don't know much about Ditko. First thing that comes to mind is he was a recluse, I guess. He worked on Spider-Man into the 30s, was
39
it?
Or 38.
38.
Yeah, and like you said, I know it got to a point where he was just doing it and sending it in. At that period of time, I could see Stan just kind of, with everything else being on Stan's plate, I could see him just being okay with it because the book was successful and going, okay, he sends it in, I'll write it, move on. I've got Fantastic Four, I've got, X-Men, whatever. That's honestly about as much as I know. I don't know a lot about Ditko other than things he's worked on, but personal stuff,
Well, I know people that have met Ditko, and they've said that he was a very, very nice man. He did subscribe to Ayn Rand's objectivism theories, which is basically a pretty much black and white version of the world. There is no grays. There's right and there's wrong. And this is the kind of stuff he explored in his Mr. Ray stuff years later. And he sort of did it with Peter Parker too. You know, the fact that, you know, you can't shirk responsibility. The there's good and there's bad. There's evil. And you know, he tried to put more of that into Spider-Man, and Stan, you know, layered it more and grayed it out. And I think that's where some of the animosity came from Ditko, is that, you know, he didn't like the dialogue he was putting into Peter Parker's mouth.
Really? Because I always thought it was that people thought Stan was more the creative control of Spider-Man and not Ditko, and that's why Ditko had the bone to pick, because he was like, no, man, I'm basically doing it. All he's doing is the dialogue.
No, look at the credits. Ditko was actually credited as the plotting Spider-Man.
Oh, okay.
Because Ditko was bitching about it. He said, hey, man, I'm doing the work here. I'm plotting this thing. And Stan said, okay, we'll give you the credit. And he credited him, I think, starting around number 18, somewhere around there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mark, what do you throw in here?
I think it might have been one of those situations of oil and water, you know, like they just didn't mix. I mean, sometimes there's just personalities that don't gel very well. So, and sometimes when you have somebody that's very, very principled, but it's not a universal principle, you know what I mean? Like it's something that other people have a hard time with. It creates friction because you don't understand it. So I really don't know, like Andy, I don't really know the situation, but I do know that he was a recluse, and that one of my favorite runs on Spider-Man was the Ditko stuff. And then if you think about Doctor Strange, and then even Hawk and Dove, if you think about it, it's like, it's good and evil. It's black and white. Like, you know, that if Graham, you know, was pulling from, you know, it correctly, then that is kind of his belief. His belief is kind of like it's right and wrong. There's no gray. There's no in between. So, you know, that's always going to cause problems because those things do exist. There is everything in between as well. So I don't really know. All I know is I really like his work, and I was I was privileged that Mark Waid gave me an ink job on a Green Lantern, and I got to ink Steve Ditko.
Did you?
Story. Yeah, I still have some of the pages. Yeah, it was just phenomenal.
Well, one thing I gathered from what I've seen is regardless of what the relationship was, Stan had a great deal of respect for Ditko and his abilities, his talents. And I thought that, you know, to stand up for Stan here for a minute, to be in that situation and have that sort of antagonistic relation with someone, but still have the respect that he had for him, that he wasn't just like, you're fired, you're off the book or whatever. You know, it had to take Ditko to actually step away from the book, and Stan wasn't even happy about it. There was a story that in there that he was talking to a college, and he was making one of those college rounds, you know, and speaking at a college, and made the announcement that Ditko was leaving Spider-Man, and people were just like, no. But the funny thing is, from a standpoint, for me, I like Romita on Spider-Man better than Ditko. And
yeah, so did I.
Interesting thing I found out was that Romita they put him on Daredevil, and he wanted to stay on Daredevil, and he did not want to take over Spider-Man. But he was kind of forced into it by the situation and the circumstances, by Ditko just saying, okay, I'm done, you know. And I love Romita's stuff. I mean, I can imagine Spider-Man, especially Silver Age Spider-Man, without Romita.
Well, Romita brought sexy to it. Like, his women were great, but Ditko's Spider-Man, actually, for me, he looks more like a kid. It's more fluid. I think the movement's better. I think Romita's stuff is sexy. You know, the line work is pretty, all that stuff. But he's a little bulky. Like, the Spider-Man's a little bulky and a little clunky. And so that's, for me, I kind of like the Ditko stuff a little bit better. But somebody brought Daredevil. His Daredevil was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When Romita took over Spider-Man, he thought it was going to be temporary, and he was aping Ditko's pen style too in those early issues. But really, if you think about it, what happened in those 38 issues defined everything. I love Romita. He was one of my first inspirations because I love the way he drew, and because it was pretty and sexy, but it also changed the entire flavor of what Spider-Man was about. Because now Peter Parker is not this high school nebbish. I mean, he doesn't have one super hot girlfriend. He's got two super hot girlfriends, you know.
Well, and he was drawn handsome. You know, John Romita Sr. drew him.
Yeah,
he drew him handsome. Whereas Ditko,
he was riding a motorcycle in town, hanging
he had
out.
the physique too. Like, yeah, he had the power body, and like Ditko kind of gave him more just the fluidity. And
and when Ditko drew him in clothes, he was frumpy and you know, he had all kinds of other problems. And every single classic villain came out of those 38 issues. Minus, I mean, you could say the Rhino, and I don't know that I'd put him in the same league as Dr. Octopus, the Sandman, or Green Goblin, or the Vulture, or any of those, Electro, and the Kingpin. And the Kingpin was what? You know, he's basically a mob guy, you know, big fat mob guy. So I mean, that's what came out of the Romita era, and I'm not slagging Johnny because he's my guy, and those stories with the tablet that they did with the Kingpin and the Magia and the Lizard, like in issue 69 through 75 or something like that, were some of my favorite stories ever. But the Ditko run is where all the foundation of everything was laid.
Well,
that's my
absolutely.
favorite.
That's true.
But let me ask you, because I don't remember. Didn't Ditko with the Marvel movies? Didn't he not want to be on the credits and not get paid? There was some kind of
I thought I heard he turned down money.
Yeah, he turned down money and credit for the creation of Spider-Man and some of the other things that he had done, and that's when you know that's a stubborn dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like. You know, that probably says more than anything that we could speculate on. Is like, how do you know, like Alan Moore is the only other one that I know that has, you know, got really principled with the Watchmen and stuff like that. But he was already pretty well off. I don't know if Ditko, you know, was that well off, you know, or is that well off, you know?
It's funny because him and Kirby were both really pissed about not getting royalties or any sort of incentives to go with their creation of these characters. And so it's funny that later in life, when you get an opportunity to get some royalties, that he would have turned them down. I guess maybe on principle.
Who's he hurting? Who's he hurting? He's not hurting Marvel. Like, if somebody's trying to give you money, you go, no, keep it. It's not hurting.
I don't know that the money part, the royalty part, is actually true, because obviously there were no royalties back then.
Right.
Credit was a big thing. They did want credit, and you know, if Ditko was true to his objectivism, then and he agreed to work for hire, and that way he was paid for the pages he produced, and that's it. So if he lives in that black and white world of objectivism, then he's not due money from a movie that he had nothing to do with.
Right.
Yep. That's an interesting take. That could be very, very true.
You know,
so I don't know why he did it. You know.
Yeah, and he wasn't a recluse. I mean, his address was in the phone book. His name was on a nameplate right outside his apartment. You could look him up. You could call him up. People would knock on his door. You know, he didn't want to be bothered, and he wouldn't suffer fools or fanboys going off on him and stuff. But people have talked to him and had conversations, letters writing to him, you know, that he's responded to and signed. And, you know, I think Ditko is a complex man, and it's hard to buttonhole him. You know, we want to make him was it the Schlesinger, or what was that guy's name? That author who was a recluse, something like that. Schlesinger, I forget his name. Anyway, I don't think
But
Ditko.
there are articles that say that he was a recluse, because I remember, reading that stuff. So whether it's true or not, I don't know. But I do
But he
remember.
went out in the streets of New York. I mean, he ate lunch at the same place every day. It's not like he was, holed up in his little apartment. He had an apartment and he had a studio, and then he would go to it every day. He worked every day, and then he'd go off and have lunch at this place, and the people knew him and everything. That doesn't sound like a recluse to me. It just sounds like a guy who doesn't want to engage in fandom.
Yeah. Well, that may be a more accurate description.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a broader
Salinger. Thank you, Hyper Potato.
Yeah. Let's take a broader look at this, the Silver Age, in the sense that one of the things I got that I thought was funny that I'm getting from this book is that every decade you had basically the same thing. All the people involved in the industry were like, this industry is going to be dead in 5 years, and we're going to be out on the street. That was what they were saying in 1957 when Marvel had a big layoff, and they had to cut everybody. And it was just basically Stan and Kirby and Ditko doing monster books and nothing else, right? Until they came up with the FF. And then, of course, the distribution deal they had to sign was with the company that owned DC Comics. So they would only allow them 8 titles a month. Right, so that's why they were cramming superheroes into Tales of Suspense and Tales to Astonish, so they get more characters out there because they only had a limited number of books. Mm-hmm. And of course, that exploded in 1968, and that's how we got Submariner #1, Captain Marvel #1, Silver Surfer #1, Iron Man, all these #1s in '68.
Yeah,
but I think it's interesting, and of course, this jumps out of the Silver Age just to make a point. But in the '70s, you had the same thing. I was reading quotes from Claremont and Englehart and Jim Starlin saying, oh, this industry is going to be dead by 1980. We'll all have to get real jobs. So this has been the circulating threat that this industry is going to die since it began, it seems like. But
even when I broke into the industry in the 80s, they were talking the same way.
Exactly. Well, the question is, and this is more of a theoretical, but you had this big boom in 1968 where Marvel really started to push they launched all their they got freed up from their contract that was restricting them on titles. And so they just everything, Nick Fury, S.H.I.E.L.D., all these comics were coming out in 1968. And they were basically, the old strategy, of course, was push the competitor off the market. The more books you have out in the newsstand, you're going to push DC. And that's what everybody was trying to do to everybody. And it wasn't necessarily driven by, oh, we're selling so many books, so let's put out more. It was more like, let's take over the industry so we can get what sales there are by pushing these other guys off the racks. But why do you think we go from 1968, which maybe you can say was the pinnacle, the height of the Silver Age, that in 2 years later, by 1970, when Conan's coming out, superheroes aren't selling. Marvel's having to rethink, we're going to do monster books, we're going to do barbarian books, something to get energize the market. What do you think happened? What do you think the mistake was, maybe is a better way of putting that happened between 68 and 70 that saw this boom go to bust so quickly?
I mean, it could just be putting out that much quantity. It could just be that simple as that, just putting out that much quantity, because, you can only sustain so much. So if you flood it too fast, it could be detrimental to what you're trying to do.
Well, I think it's, that's a good point. And isn't that what we're seeing continually happening every decade or every 5 years in comic books? It's like, they push it out there. Was there, by that time, in 1968, was there a limited audience and readership, kind of like we've got now, where there's X amount of people that buy comics, and that number isn't really growing, and it's not really decreasing. It's staying,
it's staying the same. Yeah, I mean, it could have been, because by 68, 69, you had the established titles of Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, X-Men, Avengers, and so on. So you push out so much more stuff. And, as a consumer, you're like, well, I don't want to give up these, the ones I just mentioned. I guess I can try some of this new stuff. And you try it, but if it doesn't really latch on, or if you're just on a budget, just like today, it just isn't sustainable.
Do you think there's a falling out of favor? In other words, a lot of people look back to the Batman TV show, right? So it comes out in '66, I believe, and it went through did it die in 68 or 69? It kind of
68.
Okay.
Yeah.
It had, like, it was really popular for the short period of time, and then it sort of campiness got old, and that campiness kind of got pushed onto the comic books, and people were kind of like tired of it and sort of moved away. Was that, I mean, do you think that was part of the reason why they suddenly were starting to have trouble right after everything was looking so good?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it was a confluence of events. 1968 was the height of the Vietnam War. The Tet Offensive launched, and we were really entrenched in it. Young people, you know, the typical comic book readers were probably moving on to other things at that point. And, you know, and by 1970, you know, they were fed up with the shit in the war and all that kind of stuff. And they were, you know, starting all the things that they did in the 1970s. And you couple that with distribution issues and rising costs for paper. You know, I think it was a whole slew of things that that started to cause, and all that eventually funneled into what became the implosion in 1978.
Yeah, for me, I think the, like what Graham was saying, but just to add more detail, is the fan base grew up. Like the people that were buying those books when they first came out, they had grown up. So maybe they didn't find a new audience in that amount of time. So when I broke in the business, they were always saying, like, you know, 3 to 5 years, you have the kids, and then they grow up, and then they start finding novels and things like that. So comics was always just kind of a transitional from like childhood storybooks to, you know, reading H.G. Wells or, you know, Jules Verne or you know, Edgar Rice Burroughs or something like that. So it was always kind of like a gateway. It was like an in-between kind of medium. And so, you know, maybe they just didn't capture the imagination after that initial group of kids bought the books. So maybe there was some of that, and like what Graham was saying, the world or the United States was kind of growing up. Like there was cynicism, and there was a little bit more of like people thinking about like the ramifications of what your government's doing, and, you know, the president being shot, and just, you know, the age of innocence going away. And so maybe there was just it didn't resonate with anybody anymore. It didn't connect. And then when you think about the 70s that came after, they started becoming a little bit more political. They started becoming a little bit more edgy and a little bit more grown up, because I think maybe that's what the fan base wanted, or, you know, that's what reality or the world was shifting over towards.
That's interesting, because they made the point that when they again, I'm referencing this book, when they got into the 70s, and you started bringing in guys like Englehart and Jim Starlin, and these guys were all dropping acid and smoking weed and doing drugs and coming up with these weird stories and stuff. And they were really hitting a market of a little bit older reader that were also into the drug culture and really digging the, you know, Warlock and Captain Marvel, and they're getting their minds blown, all that kind of thing. But they also made the reference that the sales weren't really increasing that much. They had kind of like a core audience that liked those books, but it really didn't do much in terms of the sales numbers. And I think maybe you guys are right, because if you look at the 70s, in late 60s, early 70s, there wasn't competition for the entertainment dollar like there is now. So something else had to be feeding the disinterest in comics. And maybe like it was just, like you said, the whole culture changed in the 60s to the point where cynicism and stuff was, you know, the drug culture and all this kind of things. And so this sort of innocent superhero stuff seemed completely irrelevant, even maybe to younger kids.
Well, also just think about like the juggernaut that Marvel was in the early 60s. It was on fire. Like if you were a kid, well, we were kids, you know, you had to heard about it. I think that the Spider-Man animated cartoon was within the first year or something of the comic. Like licensing on Spider-Man alone, like from the first year, it was already being licensed. Like like Marvel was connecting with people. So this was definitely like a movement. And if you think about like everything that we've been talking about, it was they were on fire, man. One book after the other, one villain after another. Like the whole universe was being created. So how do you compete with that? You know, once you have a generation that kind of grew up on that, then where do you go after that? You know, like if there's nothing else that's on that level, that kind of excitement, then, you know, it's going to pale in comparison. So maybe they just created such an amazing event, you know, for 10 years that nobody could really top it. And then everybody was kind of disillusioned after that. You know, like there was nothing that was as cool. I don't know.
It's like when Superman came on the scene in 1938. It was a bombshell. He was on cereal boxes, a radio program, serials, movie serials, all kinds of merchandising. Superman was merchandised out the ass. And just like Popeye, they took the edge off what made the character special and had to white bread him and kind of soften him for all this marketing. And, but Superman was an edgy book and Batman was an edgy book, and people related to that back then. Well, eventually they became the main guys. Marvel comes out. They're edgy. They're new. They're exciting. They're printing on cheap paper. And then Marvel expands and becomes what DC was, the main guys. They outsold DC. So they lost their edginess, their fire, and all those things that made them special when they were smaller, the same way DC lost it with Superman and Batman in the beginning too. I mean, it just tends to happen as it becomes so big. The rough edges get polished off.
Well, look what Marvel's doing right now cinematically. They're doing the same thing. Like it's just a barrage. It's like boom, boom, boom. Like they're just hitting you 3 times a year with epic movies. So film, and as far as the movie industry is concerned, it's a juggernaut. You know what I mean? Like everybody, all these other studios are looking at the Marvel movies as a template. They're looking at the Marvel movies on all, this is the successful way to do it. So I think that if you create something in such an event, like it's so undeniable, like the Marvel universe in the 60s was undeniable. Like it was a movement, it was in pop culture. It translated beyond the comic books. Then where is there to go after that? Like at some point the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to fade out as well.
Yeah, it's already starting to collapse.
Yeah, piggybacking on what Graham had pointed out earlier, I think is interesting because when you're going back to the creation of Superman, it made me think of this, that you look at World War II, right? And we had a unified enemy, in Hitler and the Axis powers, and everybody was on board, right? And it was Americana, love the country, and superheroes. That was the golden age was called the golden age for a reason. I mean, that was boom market for comics was 38 through 45, right? And those were all mostly warriors or threat of warriors. And so you had people needing escapism, but they also used their superheroes to beat the crap out of their enemies, But look at how different that reaction was when we faced with a 10-year war in Vietnam, right? And how society looked at that completely differently than they did World War II. And so now you have these superheroes, and instead of using these superheroes to beat up, the communist menace or whatever in Vietnam, it was totally, we're looking at their own government and their own selves and going, this is something we shouldn't even be involved in. Are we doing the wrong thing? And that sort of patriotism that sort of fueled the golden age of comics and superheroes was suddenly stripped away and went the total opposite direction in the 60s. And it came to a head in the late 60s and early 70s, and that may be that disenfranchisement that Graham, and Art, you guys were both alluding to, that may have had a lot to do with people just going, even kids saying, I don't really have time for this, even though there wasn't video games or something else to spend their money on, they just weren't necessarily interested in that stuff.
Yeah, and to put sales into perspective, Captain Marvel comics was sold every other week back in the 1940s, the original Captain Marvel Adventures. And they sold 1 million copies every other week.
It's amazing.
1 million copies every other week.
Right. Superman did too. And I think Fred might actually, in the chat on Facebook, he says like in the 70s around that time, you had characters like Ghost Rider, Tomb of Dracula, Wolfman, or the Werewolf by Night. and then like, you had Kiss as far as music, and movies, you had Rosemary's Baby, things like that, that the culture was kind of changing to, less of that altruism, like straightforward good guy. They were going into more of this like mysticism, or this more edgier type of, kind of hero, but maybe a gray area, hero that wasn't quite as squeaky clean, something that they felt was more realistic or relatable than, somebody that does the right thing just because,
Well, and that was the whole early 70s all your popular books, with the exception, of course, of Spider-Man and FF, they always sold a consistent amount. But your books were Ghost Rider, Werewolf by Night, Tomb of Dracula, Man-Thing, Swamp Thing over at DC. It was just a totally different vibe on the newsstand. And even as a kid, that's when I was buying, right?
Yeah.
And
Me too.
I bought Captain America a little bit. I always bought Spider-Man. I bought some runs of Avengers here and there, but I was buying the monster books. I was one of those kids who was buying the monster books because I thought they were cool.
Yeah.
And
if I was buying a superhero book, it's because it had a hero that was a monster, like the Thing. Or the Hulk.
Well, do you remember there was like Brother Voodoo, and then there was the Son of Satan? Like,
yeah.
The Son of Satan, he had the pitchfork, and it shot like fire out of it and stuff. Yeah.
That's because the comics code got lifted. They started to chip away at the comics code, because all that stuff they weren't allowed to show. You couldn't show vampires, you couldn't show werewolves, all that kind of stuff. And then they just said, screw it, after those drug issues, and they realized we don't need the comics code. They started to chip away at it and release all those things.
Well, historically speaking, too, like we were saying, that by that time Marvel was already kind of dying down from their 60s stuff. So from what I remember hearing is that Marvel's once again just throwing their hands up and just going, you guys do whatever you want. You know what I mean? Because we clearly don't know what sells. And that's when those characters, the outcropping of all those characters happened. When
Roy Thomas took over and just sort of let guys, for a lot of, let guys do what they wanted to do. It's kind of like they had this sort of idea that it was like, hey, if it sells, great. If it doesn't, you're fired. But I don't care what you do, just as long as it sells.
We'll move in another direction. Yeah, like I think that's what comics should do now. I think in the contemporary sense, instead of like the corporations like DC and Marvel just going, all right, let's hear the best ideas you guys go and create. They're like mandating, where instinctively and even historically, if you think about it, the way comics have always kind of rebounded was when they just threw their hands up, like the powers that be, and said, we don't know what sells. You guys do whatever, and then, a Ghost Rider comes up, or, Man-Thing, Swamp Thing, whatever it is, comes out of that creative just frustration. Like, what's next? Well, let's just throw a Hail Mary pass and see what sticks. And I think that's kind of what's needed right now.
Comics were always chasing popular culture, which is what I always liked about them. When Star Wars came out, not only did they do Star Wars comics, but they did all kinds of knockoffs. When Westerns were in, there were Westerns everywhere. War comics, whatever was hot, those guys were on it because it was immediate. They had monthlies, they could throw this stuff out quick before the fire went out. And now we don't do that. We don't chase what's happening around us in the media and popular culture. They're trying to set it. They're trying to create that next thing. And in so doing, they just have bomb after bomb because, if you could do that consistently, you'd be a genius.
But they're not even really creating, they're recreating.
Yes, they're not creating anything.
Like if they were like creating brand new stuff, then maybe at least there'd be integrity involved. You know what I mean? Like if they were creating like whatever kind of book, that they want. I'm trying not to get too political, but then you could at least go, well, there's integrity. They're creating something brand new. But what they're doing is they're taking an established character and they're trying to rebrand them into something different. And that's, I think, where they're getting into problems. Because if they really had, integrity, they would just start creating these characters from scratch. And I think
who's going to create that, Art? Who's going to create those characters?
There are people that would, if the corporations maybe got out of the way and stopped mandating stuff.
Well, if they allowed them a piece of the pie, there's no incentive for creators to go and create anything for Marvel or DC, because if it does hit, they own it.
Right.
You know, and you know, because of the paradigm shift of publishing, you can now do that yourself, as we all are doing. You don't need the company to do that, and now you own the IP yourself. And you know, so there is no incentive for anybody to go to Marvel and DC and give them their best ideas.
I would argue there never was.
Yeah, that's true. Because
there was, only from the point of view that you didn't have you didn't have an option. If you wanted to be a pro, you had to work for Marvel or DC.
Right. What choice did you have?
Yeah.
When we all got into the business,
they had a stranglehold on distribution
to make a living. It was Marvel or DC. There were other companies out there, but if you want to make a living, it was work for Marvel and DC because the page rate was better than, a First Comics, even a Dark Horse at the time, Pacific, whatever back then.
Right.
Well, nobody in the Silver Age ever dreamed beyond this just being a commercial art job, that they would be.
Right. It was commercial art. Yeah.
Actually, millions or billions of dollars. So it was easy, I think, to come up with some. Oh, we'll call him Machine Man and let's do this. Little did you know that there'd be a Machine Man television show 40 years from now. They weren't even thinking like that. These guys were all commercial artists, just working at doing the job, getting it done on time, getting paid. And here's an interesting question for you guys. Obviously, most everybody on this panel, or all of us, believe that the future, if there is going to be future in comics, it's going to be through independent. Because Marvel and DC are just killing themselves in the most ridiculous ways possible. But so thinking back on what we've talked about in terms of the Silver Age and what worked in the Silver Age and the wonderment of the Silver Age, is there any lessons that we can take from that period of time, the Marvel period of time in the Silver Age, that can be incorporated into what we're doing now as independent publishers to get that kind of excitement, to get people to jump on board, other than just saying, well, we're not Marvel and DC, so you should buy our books?
I think Image Comics, did that. I mean, they broke free, they rebranded and built, something that was exciting. They had like 10 years, so are you saying, like, are you asking if, like, independently, like, things that we're doing, that we could do something like that?
Yeah, well, not necessarily us all joining forces and being a company together, which I don't think is a bad idea, but it's a complicated idea. Yeah. But just that where we're at, just in terms, I'm talking about creatively, not necessarily publishing structure wise, but just creatively, what should we be thinking about as we're producing comics? What do you guys think will work? Or what do you have a strategy? Do you have a plan of action in terms of creative and developing characters? What type of characters, how do you approach that? That's kind of what I'm getting at. That you think, if you look back and look at Marvel during its most successful time, which was when they were, like we just talked about, were creating these great ideas, and they were new ideas, and yet people were still grabbing onto them. Is there a way to recreate that here in our independent market? Because Marvel and DC have just totally abandoned that whole concept. Right.
I think if you create from the heart and you do, what you really feel like that connects with you and that's important to you, I think that passion's going to come across. But ultimately, it's always going to come down to the consumer. It's going to come down to connecting with an audience. So let's just say Graham's Alien Alamo all of a sudden just connects, or Andy's First Man, or Chrono Mechanics, or Black and White, or Garbage Man, or Kit Carson. Like, if that connects, then that becomes Spider-Man. That ends up having its own life, like Walking Dead, something like that. If that's all it takes, like if any of us had something that hit like that, it would change everything. Like Walking Dead had that moment, but let's just say First Man gets optioned and becomes like a major, motion picture, and then everybody sees it and everybody connects to it and stuff. Then not only is it going to change Andy's life, but everybody's going to be looking at like what we're doing in a different light, You know, so I think success that translates and connects with an audience can have its own life. You know, it could change everything, and you never know what that's going to be.
Yeah, so that's relying on other media to push it. I think the question is, what are we doing, or what can we learn from the Silver Age that we can apply to the sale of comics to connect to the readers? Am I right, Aaron? That
yeah.
Well,
okay.
What I'm taking from it is actually what Art did say. What he said was that you have to know your audience. You know, you have to find your audience. That's the thing. And so, you know, if you decide you're going to do a superhero comic, let's say an independent superhero comic, well, you have to know that you're competing against two major companies that specialize in that. Okay. So you've already got an uphill battle. So the way I'm approaching it is to touch on genres they do not touch, and create my own world, my own universe within that frame structure. Fans like continuity, but they don't necessarily want to have to buy a book every single month because it's expensive, and we can't put out books every single month because it just takes us too long. You know, we're in the boutique comic business. We're putting out better books, and they look better, and they have more value to them, but we can't put them out every month. So how do you get around that? Okay, you produce books that connect or have a series, you know, that aren't either sequels or what's the word I'm looking for? Sequels or like the next issue, you know, a series, you know. So it's key to understand who your audience is and go after them with what they're looking for. Just like the lessons learned from CrossGen, don't set yourself up for an uphill battle, and try and cut your own path, but know your audience. You know, I think that's the problem that CrossGen had, is that, you know, they kind of shot themselves in the foot a little bit.
Well,
I think with CrossGen, he just grew it way too fast.
Yeah,
because he wasn't, you know, kind of like you said, Graham, we weren't doing superhero stuff, so we weren't worried about competing with Marvel and DC. That was more genre type stuff.
Right.
But he was trying to tie everything together with the whole sigil thing, and that could have been tossed out the window just to have the separate books. They didn't have to tie together with this one thing.
Right.
But I think, you know, he just expanded too quick. He just got too big for his britches too fast.
And that's a mistake a lot of people make, a lot of businesses make, is that they grow they want to grow too fast, you know, and they and then the people that they were serving get shortchanged, and then they move on.
Do you guys think that there's a place for, again, I don't know that I want to use Image Comics model, but where we've got several people doing independent comics these days, right? And we're not, I mean, you've got, I guess, Ethan Van Sciver with his Comics Gate and things like that, but would it behoove us to somehow be a connected force to allow for perhaps crossovers, or to you don't want to give up your rights and your profit, but to somehow connect in a way that you have a comics group that people are buying titles from this group. Let's just hypothetically say the four of us say, okay, we're going to do the Compass Comics group, because Graham actually has a name. Okay, so
damn you, Graham.
Right? And we're all publishing.
I'm taking 20% of each of your IPs.
But we each do our own.
All right, Stanley.
Time where, you know, you say, well, you know, why don't we do a crossover, not necessarily an event, but so-and-so can appear in so-and-so's book or you do, you know, a team up book or something like that, where you've got people, instead of taking the fan base and spreading them out in 16 different directions, have them coming together and say, okay, this is a company that produces, like Image did in a way, I guess, that produces these books, and I can, because I think, and I may be wrong about today's fan, I don't know for sure, but I still think that there's a lot of interest from fans in connected universes, that they can, rather than just saying, well, I read Graham's book, and I read Aaron's book, and I read Andy's book, and I read Art's book, and they're all good stories, but they don't really connect. There's nothing I can get deeply involved in, you know what I mean? And that's what Marvel and DC allows fandom to do, is to become involved in that universe and the minutia that makes up that universe.
You know what?
Is there a place for that in independent comics? Is that even possible?
Well, as you were saying that, Aaron, I was just thinking, like, what might be even better than that or more fun is just the unexpected thing. Like Black and White shows up in Garbage Man, or Garbage Man shows up in Alien Alamo, or whatever. You know what I mean? Then all of a sudden, like somebody that's reading Graham's book, like there's this character that pops up, and then it's like, who is that? Oh, well, that's Garbage Man. And that's, like Aaron's, thing, because it's totally unexpected. Like other than us connecting here, most people probably don't know that Graham knows Aaron, that knows me and Andy and stuff like that. So when these things happen, it would be completely unexpected. I think the universe thing, it can work and it has worked, but I also think it's a double-edged sword, because I do think that a lot of that is what's causing Marvel and DC to have some of the problems, is because it's so daunting, and with the cover price being what it is, it's cost prohibitive to buy a universe. Like to buy all of the Marvel books every month would be hundreds of dollars. So that's quite an investment to get a universe. Where I think like what we're doing is like it's a one and done, but maybe the next issue, there's an unexpected crossover that happens, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, what is this? And then they can get, they can go, oh, well, that's Aaron's Kit Carson or whatever, and then so on and so forth. Because I think like that Image thing, I don't think will ever happen, because will it ever happen again? I think things like it can happen, but do you guys remember Pacific Comics?
Mm-hmm.
Pacific was like all these top creators publishing, and I remember having a conversation with Jim Lee about this, and the difference was, and Jim pointed this out because I brought that up. I said, oh, Image would be like Pacific, and he's from San Diego, and that's where Pacific Comics was, and I was close, by there as well. And he said the difference is Neil Adams, Jack Kirby, all those guys with Pacific Comics, they were popular, but they were already kind of sliding down from their pedestal of the top of where they were. The thing about Image was all of us were leaving at the tippy top of our careers. And so, even Forbes wrote, articles about how this hurt Marvel stock, things like that. So that's the big difference. So I don't think anybody has that kind of cachet or caliber to make such an impact like that as a publishing company ever again, unless you could kind of try to replicate that exact scenario in doing so, which I'm not signing off on, but I mean, it could happen. But I just think it was one of those lightning in a bottle things. And then there were a group of people that were like-minded and willing to put their careers on the line, to do such a thing. So I don't know. It's like you guys brought up cross-gen. Like, I just don't know, even with deep pockets, if you could make a publishing company work, Well,
it's sort of antithetical to what we're doing. We're not producing monthly comics. We're not doing that kind of stuff. I mean, what's the point of one more comic publisher if you're going to produce the same type of stuff that's already been out there? I think by offering a higher end, like I keep saying, boutique comics, of quality story, quality artwork, quality packaging, of when you hold that comic in your hand, does that feel really good? Plus the goodies and all, and the interaction you have with the creators, all that is part of the whole boutique mystique. Oh, I should copyright that, boutique mystique. That I think that the backers really like, because they can't get that with the walls put up with companies,
Right.
So really, the auspice is on us to kind of cross promote each other, right? To make other people aware that, yeah, I'm doing this, but Art's doing that over there, so check that out too.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to just kind of trying to be an island unto ourselves. Because I think, obviously what we're doing, we wouldn't have been doing this, 5 years ago, right? Where we're live streaming and trying to get people interested in what we're doing so that they will watch this, which is, of course, is free, and then maybe go check out what we're selling as a product. So in a lot of ways, I guess what we're doing right now is what Stan was trying to do, running around to college campuses and being on, doing newspaper articles or doing magazine articles and pushing the narrative about, Marvel Comics is so great, you should check it out. And then that becomes part of their mindset, and then they go and they check it out.
And I'll tell you, right now, this is where it's at. This is where it's at right now in comics. What we're doing, this is it. You know what I mean? The most interesting stuff in the industry right now is coming out of the independents and people like us. Hands down. I mean, if you think about most of our careers, we've been where everything was happening throughout 20, 30, 40 years of doing comics. And it's not haphazard that we're all here right now. We're here because this makes sense. You know what I mean? Like, this makes sense, and this has legs. This is going to be big. I think we've just seen the tip of the iceberg. And I've said, if we can sustain it 3 more years, if we can get a good solid 5 years with Comicsgate or this independent publishing, idea, I think that it's gonna be in the history books, and it's gonna be undeniable. Like it's gonna be there, and they're gonna go, oh, we had the golden age, the silver age, Image Comics, whatever, but we had the CG revolution, kind of thing happening. And I know you guys get it too, but there's so many comic professionals on a weekly basis that ask me questions. Even Aaron, before he made the move, we were talking. So these things are happening. People are paying attention. They're criticizing because there's the old regime that wants to keep things the way they are. They want to scare their employees so they don't jump ship or they don't do this independently. But if the success continues to go, which I think it will, you're going to see more and more people independently publishing, start networking like we're doing, and things like that. And at that point, it's going to be completely undeniable as far as the comic book history books.
And once fans start to get more comfortable with the idea of crowdfunding, because that's one of the hurdles that we have to kind of leap over right now, is that there are people that are trepidous about supporting products that you're not going to get till December, say. So they're tying up their money and stuff like that. So once we overcome that and they get more and more comfortable with that, we're going to get more and more people coming into the crowdfunding, and it's going to explode.
Yeah, because it's a new way of doing business. It's a new way of commerce,
Right.
Because basically what they're doing is they're the producers. They're the money that's basically funding these projects, and we could not do it without them. I mean, the reason Marvel and DC works is because they'll pay you per page. So this way, we're getting money up front, which allows us time to then create the property. Then we can get that to the consumer. And it is different, and you're right, Graham, but people like us, we have a history. Like Marvel, DC, none of us would be where we're at if we could not make deadlines, if we could not keep our word. As well as I do, we've met amazing creative people, just gifted, but could not make a deadline. You know what I mean? Like, they just could not make a deadline. They last one issue, and that's it. They don't have a career.
Potentially the new black and white boom of the late 80s.
it could be.
Maybe more financial success, because I don't think those guys made the money that some of us are throwing up right now.
Well, I mean, there was, but I mean in the sense that there was this sense for years when Turtles got hot, right? That, but we're a long way from the Silver Age at this point, but when Turtles got hot, and then it was just like any black and white magazine came out, and maybe that was sort of the collectors fueling it a little bit too, but it was like people were buying radioactive black belt hamsters, Lone Wolf and Cub, which was good, but Fish Police, all these different things that were coming out because they were black and white, and that was kind of the fad. You know what I mean? I would hope that we're producing stuff that isn't just fad worthy, because a lot of that stuff, let's face it, was amateurish and crap. But some of it actually was good and lasting. But I guess I'm wondering could this be something that starts to steamroll and pick up speed? And I guess you guys are indicating that that's what you think. That so suddenly an independent comic is not something that's risky, but it's desirable, as opposed to,
particularly as you deliver. I think backers if you have no background are going to be a little bit more leery about investing in your concept, in your project. But as soon as you deliver and you go over what you're going to deliver, i.e., you either deliver it sooner than said, or it's better than they thought it was going to be, art, story, production wise, even how you ship these things is important. If you just throw your comic in a bubble wrap bag, it feels like a piece of crap that comes into your mail. It feels like junk mail. They've just spent $25, when it comes in a nice Gemini mailer with a thank you letter and all the other goodies that comes with it. Now it feels like something special.
Oh, it's personal.
And that's the whole point, is this should be an event. Every one of these things should be an event, and it should be special. And when it shows up on your doorstep, they're so excited they're shooting unboxing videos or showing it up on social media and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, these are red carpet events. These are red carpet events, and you guys, you and Andy are in the middle of it right now. And these campaigns, you guys are, just like an actor, whatever, making the talk show circuit.
Exactly.
You guys are out there. You're on the Tonight Show. You're on, the Later Show, or all these things, and you guys are promoting what you're doing. And I think that's what makes this exciting too, because we're producing the comic, but we're also, the face behind it. And the only thing close to it, just back to the golden age, is like Stan's soapbox. You know what I mean? Like, that guy was creative and he was the salesman, and as far as the example, you don't get any better than that.
Right. We're Stan and Jack rolled into one. We're doing both. We're creating the thing and we're promoting the thing. So.
And we're Martin Goodman because we're publishing it too.
Yeah, that's right.
Let me throw out a Martin Goodman story. This goes prior Silver Age, but I found this so fascinating. Now, Graham, you probably remember this because you read the book, but Martin Goodman, before he started Marvel Comics, right? He got married, went to Europe on his honeymoon, right? He and his bride, his newlywed wife, were booked on the Hindenburg to fly back, but their seats were not together and they could not get seats together. So they canceled at the last minute and took a regular flight back home and survived, obviously, and created Marvel Comics. So can you imagine that?
Wow.
Right? To have just missed being on the Hindenburg.
Oh my
because
God.
you put seats together. I mean,
that's crazy.
Talk about a charmed life. But I read that and I just could not believe it. I thought, man, that is
wow.
Martin Goodman for you. And
well,
I did
Martin Goodman, the best thing Martin Goodman ever did is just throw his hands up and give it to Stan Lee. Just give control to Stan Lee. That was the smartest thing he ever did.
I didn't realize this. I mean, I knew it in this that Atlas Comics, the second version of Atlas Comics in the 70s. I didn't realize that was Goodman and his son Chip that formed that company. I knew it was somebody from Marvel, but I didn't realize that it was actually Goodman who did it. And that's why I was so surprised it was such a miserable failure. He should have had, but I guess that just shows that he was not a creative guy, because their concepts and stuff for Atlas Comics were horrible.
Well, they had
some great artists and writers there, though, too. I mean, Chaykin and Lee or Adams and there's a whole slew of really, really good creators that worked over there.
Well, because he was paying for it, and they all wanted to go over there where there was more money.
Yeah,
but it didn't last long. I bought those when I was a kid. I bought those.
I did too.
Yeah, I have them. I just think you can't replace Stan, Jack, Ditco, Buscema, Ramita. Like they were just. It was just lightning in a bottle, And
Larry Lieber was the editor-in-chief, Stan's brother.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right.
Yeah. So it sort of always felt like the redheaded stepchild of Marvel Comics.
Well, gentlemen, we've been on for an hour and a half, so I think maybe I'll wrap this up. I think this has been a really interesting and insightful show. This is fun. I'm glad. I don't know whose idea this was, but it was a great idea. So
I think it was Art's.
It was Art's.
So who's going to host next week? Who's going to volunteer?
That's me.
Is it
Andy's
Andy?
up next? Okay.
I'm up next.
Topic.
What's that?
You get to pick the topic, and you're in charge of the promotion.
I do, and I'll put the graphic together and get it out probably tomorrow or Saturday. So,
okay, let's all remember that First Man ends tomorrow. Correct?
Yep.
So you guys want to check out? You want to go over there and check that out on Indiegogo. Of course, Graham's got Alien Alamo, which is doing really well over in Indiegogo. It's still got a ways to go, but I mean, it's still time that it's open. So get in on that. Art has Chrono Mechanics, which I actually did a cover for. I actually did a cover for Graham as well.
That's right.
But Chrono Mechanics is in demand right now, right, Art?
Yeah.
And
Yes, you do.
You guys want to check all those out. I don't have anything yet, but I will soon, and I'll obviously keep you guys posted on that as it develops. So I guess
Aaron, can you put the links into the comments here? I put the link to Alien Alamo in our private chat. You can just copy that and drop it into the comments.
Okay, hang on a second, because I'm not.
Yeah, I'll throw that in.
If you talk me through it. Okay, so
Yeah,
if I copy that.
Go to private chat,
and
then copy the link, then go to comments.
Okay.
And then just paste it right in there.
Okay, I'm trying to highlight it. Why won't this stupid thing? There it goes. All right, hang on.
I'll get mine up there.
Okay, so then I go to comments and I paste it in here. See, I'm learning all the time. Okay.
Well, also while you're doing that,
There it is.
There it is.
Oh, there it is. We need a title. So are we going with Spilling the Ink and Professionals? Spilling the Ink? Is that what we're going to do?
There was some good ones in there, though.
There you go. Throw mine in the comments.
Yeah, mine's in there too, Aaron.
All right. Give me a second here.
Because if we're going to brand this thing, we're going to have to start branding it soon.
Yeah. You don't want to wait a month?
Yeah.
So I think one of the best things we could do is get a title.
There was a bunch of ideas came up in the chat this week, and I can't remember any of them right now, but some of them were actually pretty good.
I thought we all agreed.
Spilling the Ink, yeah.
I thought Spilling the Ink was the one that had the most votes.
Yeah, and then Graham said the majority rules, and so I thought that when Graham puts that gavel down, then that's it, right?
That's it.
That's right. He slaps it down.
Right on our heads.
Hold smash.
Since Graham and Art are both older than me, I am willing to allow the senior members here to make the final decision.
Well, who brought up the professionals? I think then Andy incorporated. Oh, so you did that as well?
He brought it up, and I said I like the professionals, and then Spilling the Ink.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
there you go. I like that.
Professional
that works for me.
All right, I'm fine with that's fine.
And then Spilling the Ink, though, like that's good. Yeah.
The professionals are Spilling the Ink. Yeah.
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 So it's like the Incredible Hulk. We got like.
Here's one.
That's right. Stan has to have a.
Gavin with geezers. I'm the youngest one here. Come on.
I like that Andy keeps holding on to like I'm the youngest one here, like that's scoring you any points.
I have to because around all my friends in town, I'm the oldest. This is the only place I'm the youngest.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you right now, as far as the tweezer thing, albino thunderbuns, it takes more than tweezers to take care of this face. There's razors and there's all kinds of things. Yeah, there's hair growing everywhere.
Art shaves his forehead.
I do shave
right.
my forehead right here.
If he didn't do that, it'd be down to here.
Yeah. He's got the total opposite problem that we have. It's like growing down over his face. Ours is growing back like
He's got that
It's coming out of his
style.
ears and getting braided and
Exactly. Yeah. I do have that. There is one pet peeve about like people that are losing the hair. Is there's always that one guy that kind of keeps the horseshoe here, but then decides he's going to grow it long like that, like he's fooling somebody. Like it only works when you're wearing a hat. You know, you're like, ooh, that guy's got a good head of hair. But as soon as you take the hat off, you're like,
right.
that looks weird, man.
It's like the comb over, man. The comb over. You grow it out.
How about the comb over?
Oh no, that's the worst. That's the worst.
No.
I think you guys are all gutsy. Just shave it. And
I don't have a choice. There's no guts to it.
You know, it's like
one of you guys said that you shave.
Are you completely bald, Andy? Like do you have to shave?
I would have that.
Oh, you would? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, I still got a little bit up top, so I just leave like it's like like an eighth of an inch on there, and I don't know, makes me feel like I got something going on still.
Well, it's working for you,
Well, you're in denial,
Aaron, because you're not trying to like fool anybody. Like it's tightly cropped and everything, and it looks good, man. You look squared away.
Right. Yeah. Hey, also, I want to say one more thing. Everybody, make sure that everybody up here has their own YouTube channel, and I assume you guys, it's all under your own names, right? Andy,
Yeah,
correct.
And Graham and Art. So check those out. If you're not subscribing and liking those guys, do it, because it does help us out if you'll take the time to do that, and it doesn't cost you a dime. So as you can scroll, subscribe and like, because it's free. All right, guys.
And give this video a thumbs up and tweet it out to your friends and neighbors, because like we've been saying, we're trying to brand this show, and the only way the show is going to continue, just like our books, is if we get viewers. So so please support if you like what you see. Like Aaron said, go like and subscribe to the YouTube channels. And hopefully by Andy Smith's show next week on Thursday at 8 Pacific. What is it? Eastern time. We'll have a name for the show.
Sounds good. All right, guys. Thanks for joining me. This has been a blast, and I look forward to doing it again next week. Everybody stay safe.
Thanks, Aaron. You're a good host.
Next
That's
week.
right.
All right. Thanks, guys.
See ya. Bye.
See you, gang.